B'siyata d'shmai, we're going to learn Yoma Daf Samach Ches. We're going to start from the Mishnah, 12 lines from the bottom of Daf Samach Zayin Omid Beis. Says the Mishnah, Ba'aloi eitzel par v'soyer hanisrofin. And this is after he's already sent the goat to the Azazel, and now he's got the par, his bull, and the soyer, the goat that was designated to be Lashem Chatos. Both of them have already been shechted. The blood has already been applied to in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Heichal, on the Mizbeach Hazav. The remains have been poured onto the base of the Mizbeach, the Yisoid HaMizbeach HaChitzon, and he's done what he has to do with the soyer HaMishtaleach. Then at some point, he comes to his Purim, Par v'soyer hanisrofim. The literal translation of that is he comes to the bull and the goat, hanisrofim, which are burnt. Obviously, they haven't been burnt yet. They're both waiting there to be taken care of. So what's he do? He goes. The reason they're called Purim hanisrofim is because they're not going to be offered up on the Mizbeach as any other or most other korbanis are. Rather, they're going to be taken outside Yerushalayim and going to be burnt there. So what's he do? He comes to the par v'soyer, koron, he tears them open, and he takes out the innards, some of the parts inside. Nosnon b'megis, he immediately puts them into a bowl, which is, into a clay shoris. Vehiktiron al gabe mizbeach, not yet, but much later on in the day, he's going to take this bowl of the emurim, of the Mizbeach, or of the Par v'soyer, and he's going to put it onto the Mizbeach, the big Mizbeach in the Azara. And then what does he do? Now you've got two carcasses, two animals that have not been cut up into pieces. They're just two whole animals. So kol on b'miklois, the kol on means to braid. He takes the two animals and he braids them into a braid. That means he puts them together. They're both dead. They're both whole. So he puts them intertwined into each other, and he hangs them that way on two poles that are being held by four people, four kohanim. Vayitzion lebeis asreifa, and then the people who are carrying out these animals are going to then carry them out like this on these poles outside to the beis asreifa outside Yerushalayim. These people who are engaged, we'll learn about this more, but those who are engaged in burning the par v'soyer, the pasuk says, "V'asoyrif oisam yechabes begodov." They become tomei; their clothes have to be toivled. So, at what point do their clothes have to be toivled, or at what point do they become tomei? Mishiyotzu chutz l'choim l'sazor. The Tanakama says immediately upon leaving the walls of the Azara, they're already out. It's already called that they are taking out the animals, and they are tomei, and their clothes have to be toivled when they're finished. Reb Shimon says, "Mishayotzis ha'ur berubon." Only when the fire has already taken hold of most of the bull and the goat, whilst being burnt, only at that point the clothes of those engaged in this are tomei. The pasuk itself clearly mentions only hasoyrif, somebody who burns the oisam, this bull and the goat, is yechabes begodov. So according to Reb Shimon says hasoyrif means only in the process of burning, and that's why he says that the point in time when this person and his clothes become tomei is only when it's being burnt, actually being burnt, and we're going to learn more about Reb Shimon's opinion later on Daf Samach Ches Omid Beis. The Chachamim, however, hold, they say that not. They say that even though it says hasoyrif, it means anybody engaged in the oisam, the pasuk says anyone who's engaged in this bull and the goat, in the process of taking it to be burnt, is also included in this bracket, and as soon as they leave the Azara, these people become tomei. And that's how Rashi, it's a big discussion in the Achreinim and Zvachim, but the Rashi on Daf Samach Ches Omid Beis learns this way. Says the Gemara. And the Gemara is now taking us back to the beginning of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that after the Kohen Gadol took out the emurim, the parts of the insides of the bull and the goat that was going to be burnt later on in the day onto the mizbeach. But it says nosnon b'meigis, he put them into a bowl. V'hiktiron al gaba mizbeach. The basic reading of the Mishnah doesn't say it's going to be burnt on the mizbeach later. It seems it's being done now. And there's a big issue with that, because it's clearly not being done now. And the Gemara is asking that. V'hiktiron sol kodaitoch, can you really entertain the idea that he's going to burn it now? It's not. It's very clear. We're going to learn later on. And later on Daf Ayin, we're going to learn that he's only going to burn these emurim much later, when he's putting on the gold clothes for the last time. At this point, the Kohen Gadol still has the white clothes on, and he's still going to change into gold clothes, do what he has to do, change into white clothes again, do what he has to do, and then change into the gold clothes again, and then he's going to burn these emurim. He's not burning them now. Viktiron sol kadaitach, answers the Gemara, la'ema, don't read in the Mishnah v'hiktiron, which means and he burns them, which would mean he burns them straight away. That means he puts it into the bowl, takes the bowl to the top of the mizbeach, and chucks the emurim onto the mizbeach. No, lahaktiron al gabe mizbeach. It means put them into the bowl in order to put them onto the mizbeach at a later stage. Continues the Gemara that the Mishnah says that he takes the bull and the goat and kol on b'miklois, he brides them together, intertwines them into each other, and they get taken out this way to outside Yerushalayim. Omer b'yechanon kamin kalia, that the way they're intertwined is similar to a braid, and that's why the Mishnah uses this term kol on b'miklois. Tana loy hoya menatchon nituach bosor oila. Now the question is, these animals, the bull and the goat, is going to be taken to outside Yerushalayim, it has to be burnt. The question is, in what state are they going to be burnt? Are they going to be burnt whole as they are? Are they going to be skinned? Are they going to be cut up into limbs, parts, a number of parts, as a regular korban oila, for example? They skin the animal. After the animal's been skinned, the animal gets cut into the nesochim, into different limbs, different parts, and one knows exactly what the parts are, but we're not discussing them now, and then they get burnt that way. Well, what's the halacha with the parvasoyer shel Yom Kippurim? How do they get burnt outside Yerushalayim? So it says here that loy hoya menatchon nituach bosar oila. The parvasoyer, they were cut up into pieces, but not like the oila, which means unlike the oila that the animal was first skinned, over here the animal was not skinned, rather it was kept, the flesh was in the skin, but it was cut up in the same way that the oila parts used to be cut up. Ela oyer el gabi basar, the skin is still on the flesh, and that's how they would cut it up and burn the parvasoyer shel Yom Kippurim. Asks the Gemara, minoha nimili, what would be the source for that? The Tanya, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi says as follows: Nemar kan. It says over here in Vayikra Perek Tezayin Parashas Acharemos, in the parasha of the Avodas Yom Kippurim, it says in the pasuk that Ve'ispar achatos ve'isoyer achatos asher huvo es domam lechapir b'kodesh yoitzi el michutz lamachane v'sarfu bo'esh es oirosom ve'es besaram ve'es pirusham, which means that they would burn outside the camps, outside Yerushalayim, they would burn the skin, that's the oir, ve'es besaram, and the flesh, ve'es pirusham, and the dung, the excrement, that would also be burnt. So it mentions explicitly the oir, the basar, and the perish. V'nemar lalon, in a different parasha altogether. In the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, there we have a parasha called Par Kohen Moshiach. And as we've mentioned a number of times, it's not worth going into the details of that now. We're going to learn about it extensively when we learn Seder Kochim. But there is a certain korban which a Kohen Gadol would have to bring, or a Kohen that was anointed, a bull, which is Kohen Moshiach. For whatever reason he has to bring, there is a concept of such a korban. What does it say regarding that korban called the Par Kohen Moshiach? It there mentions also Ve'es oir hapar, the skin of the bull, Ve'es kol basari, all its flesh, Al roishe ve'al krov ve'kirboy, meaning, and there it specifies also the head, the legs, the feet, the kirboy and the insides, upirshoi, and again, the dung, the excrement is also mentioned there. So we have something in common. It's a type of gzeira shava. We have something in common between the par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim and the par kohen Moshiach. Which means, you asked a question, how would you know that the way that the par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim was burnt was that they were cut into limbs, but with the skin? The answer is, we learn it from par kohen Moshiach. And all we've got to now understand and learn is regarding Par Kohen Mashiach, how do we see from there that the limbs were separated, were put onto the Mizbeach separately, or they were burnt separately. The Par Kohen Mashiach was not put on the Mizbeach. It's also from the Nisrofim, and over there we're going to learn that it was cut into pieces, but the skin was left on. Ma'alahalon, in the same way, and we're not going to discuss it yet, we're going to discuss it in a few lines, but in the same way as over there with the Par Kohen Mashiach, al yedei nituach, it was burnt with cutting up the animal, v'lo yalidei hefshet, but it was not skinned before. Afkan, so too, the Par v'soyer shel Yom Kippurim, al yedei nituach, v'lo yalidei hefshet, it was cut into pieces, but not skinned first. V'hosom minolon, and over there with the Par Kohen Mashiach, how do you know that this was the case, that it was cut into pieces but not skinned? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. The Brisa says regarding the Par Kohen Mashiach in Vayikra Perek Daled, Ve'es oyer hapor, we mentioned this part of the pasuk before, Ve'es oyer hapor, the skin, Ve'es kol basaroi, all its flesh, al roishay, its head, Ve'al krov, its feet, kirboy, its insides, or pirshoy, with the dung inside it. And what does it say immediately after that? The next pasuk, that was pasuk Yud Aleph. In pasuk Yud Beis, what does it say? They would take the entire bull outside the camps, outside Yerushalayim, el mokem Torah, to a Torah place, el shefech hadeshen, to the place where the ashes were poured. We're going to learn about that later on. V'soraf oisoi, they would burn it, al eitzim ba'esh, on wood on the fire, al shefech hadeshen yisorif. So that's what it says there in the parasha of Par Kohen Mashiach in Vayikra Perek Daled, Psukim Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. So the Brisa says that because it mentions all the parts of the animal, of that bull, it says V'kirboy or Pirshoy, and it's supposed to, the Gemara means to say the whole pasuk, and then the first word of the next pasuk, the pasuk Yud Beis, is V'hoitzi es kol hapar. So what do we learn from there? Since all the parts of the animal are mentioned together, es hapor, es oyer hapor, the skin, ve'es kol basari, al roisha, al krav, v'kirboy, or pirushoy, it's mentioned as a whole, and then it says v'hoitzi es kol hapor, and you take out the whole par, the whole bull outside. What do we learn from them? Melamed shemoitzioi, that when you remove it from where it was shechted, to take it out of Yerushalayim, you are moitzioi sholim, it was taken out whole. Yochel, the Brisa continues, Yochel yisarfenu sholim. You may think that you actually burn it when it's whole. Answer is no. Ne'emar kan, it says here in the parasha of Par Kohen Mashiach, it mentions roishay ukrov. It explicitly singles out the head and the feet. V'ne'emar la'alon, and in another parasha, in the parasha of the korban oila, which is elsewhere in Sefer Vayikra, in Perek Aleph, it says there, Roish Ukraim, the pasuk explicitly mentions Va'orchu b'nei Aaron akeanim eis hanesochim es haroish ve'es hapoder alo eitzim, etc. Va'kerev va'kro'ayim yirchatz b'mayim, etc. So in that regular korban oila, which is offered up on the Mizbeach in the Azara, not outside, it singles out the Roish and the Kro'ayim, as in the parasha of Kohen Mashiach it's singled out. So we're going to learn Gzeira Shava from Par Kohen Mashiach from oila. Ma'al ha'alon, in the same way as by oila, it says explicitly al yedei nituach, that you cut up the animal, as the pasuk says va'orchu b'nei Aaron ha'koyanim eis hanesochim. Nesochim means the pieces, the limbs are cut up, it's not whole. Afkan, so too by Par Kohen Mashiach, al yedei nituach, it's also the animal is cut up. So asks the Gemara, Ima la'alon, if you're going to compare Par Kohen Mashiach to oila, and by oila it's al yedei hefshet, it's explicit in the psukim that you would skin the animal first. Afkan, so too by Par Kohen Mashiach, al yedei hefshet, also you skin the animal. Talmud leima, no, because it says in the pasuk v'kirboy ufirshoy. in that pasuk Yud Aleph, in Vayikra Perek Daled, in the parasha of Parkoin Mashiach, it says Ves Oyer Hapor Ves Kol Basori, referring to the skin and the flesh. Al Roishay Val Krov Ukirboy Upirshoi. It speaks about the innards of the animal, the kirboy upirshoi, and the dung inside it. So the Gemara says, what do we learn from V'kirboy upirshoi? That's the end of the Brisa. The Brisa says from those words V'kirboy upirshoi, you learn the animal wasn't skinned. What does that mean? My Talmuda, where do you see in those two words that the animal was not skinned regarding the Parkoin Mashiach? Omer of Papa. Kashem shepirshoi b'kirboy, in the same way as they didn't remove the dung from the intestines before putting it onto the Mizbeach, that would have been extremely inappropriate. Not before putting it into the Mizbeach. We're talking about the Parkoin Mashiach. Before burning it in a Mokim Toyer outside Yerushalayim, they didn't remove the dung from the intestines before burning it. That would have been highly inappropriate. Kach b'sori b'oiroi, so too when burning the skin and the flesh, they would keep the skin inside the flesh in the same way as the excrement was kept inside the animal, so too the flesh was kept inside the skin, the animal was not skinned. So we see that we learn that from the Parkoin Mashiach that it wasn't skinned. The Parkoin Mashiach you learn from the Oiloi was cut up into pieces, and then we have the Gzera Shava, you learn Parvasoyer Shlema Kippurim from the Parkoin Mashiach that it's got the same halachas, that it was cut into pieces but not skinned. Continues the Gemara. The Gemara is taking us to the final statement in the Mishnah where it says, at what point do according to Tanakama, who says that the concept of the tumah and the person being tomei and his clothes being tomei, at what point does that happen? The Tanakama says it's as soon as he leaves the Azara. Reb Shimon says no. Reb Shimon says that the pasuk says that only hasoyref, only the person who's burning it, and therefore the tumah is only at the time when the fire has taken grasp of most of the power of a soyer. Says the Gemara Tonu Rabbanon, and we learn this is a pasuk now again in the parashas Achrei Mos Vayikra Tezayin, pasuk Chav Zayin. The pasuk says as follows: Veis para chatos veisoyer chatos asher huvo as domam lechaper b'kodesh yoytzi el michutz lamachane. You take the power of a soyer outside the camps, v'sorfu ba'esh, and you burn them with fire, es oirosom ve'es besorom ve'es pirusham. So the Gemara, the Brisa says, yoytzi el michutz lamachane v'sorfu. And where do you take, which camps do you take them out of? So let's discuss it, says the Gemara. Lahalon, later on, in a different parasha, it's not really later, but in a different parasha in Sefer Vayikra, we learn that there's a concept called the Parkoin Mashiach that we've already learnt about, and there's other korbanos, which are there's a Par Ha'eda. Again, we're not discussing those korbanos. What does it say there? It says, Atonoisun lohem shalosh machanos. We're going to learn that from other sources in Psukim that the Par Ha'eda and the Parkoin Mashiach, they are burnt outside 3 camps. Not only do they have to be taken out of Machne Kahuna, which is the Azara, not only Machne Levia, which is the Harabais, but even the Machne Israel, which is Yerushalayim. It's taken outside Yerushalayim. And those korbanos, those bulls, the Par Ha'eda and the Parkoin Mashiach, they are burnt outside all 3 machanos. And we take it for granted, and there are sources for this that Rashi discusses here, that all the animals that are nisrofin outside are all compared with each other. We learn one from the other. They are all burnt outside 3 machanos. And the question is, what does it say in the pasuk? It says, Yoitzi el michutz lamachane. Machane is a single tent. You take it out of 1 camp, which would be the machne shchina, outside the Azara. Well, you know that it doesn't get burnt outside the machne Azara. It says, Yoitzi el michutz lamachane. You take it out of the 1 camp. That's where you're going to burn it? No. You know from the other bulls that we're going to soon see the sources, but it's taken out of 3 camps. And you know that all the nisrofim bachutz have the same halachas. They're burnt outside the 3 camps. Why does the pasuk here regarding the Parvasoyer Shlema Kippurim say that you take it out of 1 camp? That's what the Bryce is asking. Imkein lomo nemar michutz lamachane. Answers the Gemara, Loimar lecha, to teach you that kivun sheyotza chutz lamachane achas metamin begodim. Of course we know that to burn this bull, the bull and the goat, is outside 3 machanos. But to tell us that yotziel michutz lamachane, as soon as you've removed it from just one camp from the Azara, it's already called, you're on the way, you're already out. Once you're out, it's already tom. The person carrying it out and his clothes are tomei. And this is the source when the Tanna Kama says that me'emosai metamin begodim mishayetzu chutz lechoimas ha'azara. What's the source of that? From the fact that the pasuk says v'hoitzi el michutz lamachane. You take it out of a single camp, meaning the machne shchina, the azara. And it can't mean you burn it there because you burn it outside 3 camps. It must be to teach us this halacha of the Tanna Kama. Now the Gemara is asking, V'hosam minolon, and what's the source that with the other bulls, for example, the Parkoin Mashiach, the Para Eda, where do you learn, what's the source that they are burnt outside all 3 camps? Says the Gemara, the Tanya we learned in a Brisa, that the Pasuk says, again, regarding the Parkoin Mashiach, it says there, V'hoitzi es kol hapor, it says, Ves oira por, Ves kol basori al roishoi, Valkro v'kirbo yopirshoi v'hoitzi es kol hapor el michutz lamachane el mokim toir. And so it says there v'hoitzi es kol hapor el michutz lamachane. You take it out of a camp. That's what it says by the Parkoin Mashiach. And what does that mean? Chutz l'sholish machnes. You take it out of 3 camps. The Gemara says why? The pasuk says that you take it out of v'hoitzi es kol hapor el michutz lamachane. It mentions 1 camp. Why do you assume it means 3 camps? Maybe the pasuk means you just burn it outside the machne shchina, outside the Azara. Where do you see there that you take it out of 3 camps? Says the Brisa, the par ha'eda. Let's go to the par ha'eda. In Vayikra Perek Daled, later on in Perek Daled, in Pasuk Chof Aleph, it says there, V'hoitzias hapar, which is a different korban. It's called Par Ha'eda, which again, we're not discussing the nature of that korban. But it was a bull, and you take it out, El Michutz Lamachane, you take it out of the camp, V'soraf ois, when you burn it, Kasher soraf es hapar harishoin, Chatos hakol, you burn it the same place that the previously mentioned bull, referring to the Parkoin Mashiach, is burnt. So if you're telling me in the pasuk that you burn the Par Ha'eda in the same place as you burn the Parkoin Mashiach, then why in the pasuk of Par Ha'eda does it have to say El Michutz Lamachane? I know it's El Michutz Lamachane because it already says in pasuk Yud Beis by the Parkoin Mashiach, it says that V'hoitzi es kol hapor El Michutz Lamachane. She'ein Talmud Loimar doesn't need to say it. El Michutz Lamachane She'ein Talmud Loimar. Shehari Kvar Nemar, it already says V'soraf oisei kasher soraf es hapar harishoin. Uma Talmud Loimar El Michutz Lamachane. Why does it say take it out of the camp? The answer is Litein Loimachne Shniya, to tell us that you do take it to the same place as you burn the Parkoin Mashiach, but don't learn what it says at Parkoin Mashiach, El Michutz Lamachane, at face value, it's just 1. No, it says again in Pasuk Chof Aleph, that V'hoitzi es hapor El Michutz Lamachane, between the 2, it says twice. Besides for it saying that they get burnt at the same place, it says twice El Michutz Lamachane, to tell us that it gets burnt outside a second machane. Not only machne shchina, which is the Azara, even machne levia, which is the Harabayis. Okay, but we still don't know that you have to take it even outside the Machne Yisrael, even outside Yerushalayim. So Kashu when it says in a completely different place, non-related, what does it say? It says that you take the ashes. There was a mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen, and then after they would take a little bit of the Trumas Hadeshen off the Mizbeach and put it next to the Mizbeach, they would take the rest of the ashes outside of Yerushalayim. What does it say there? It says, "Ufoshat es begodov, velovash begodim achirim, v'hoitzi es hadeshen el michutz lamachane el mokim toyer." You take it outside the camp to a pure place. So there it says, "Michutz lamachane bedeshen she'ein Talmud loimar shehari kvar nemar el shefech hadeshen." We already says there's another point where it says in the parasha of Par Kohen Moshiach. What does it say there? besides for saying V'hoitzias kol haporel michutz lamachane el mokem toyer, it adds another 3 words. El shefech hadeshen, to the place where the ashes were taken out to. So, which means that as soon as you know where the ashes are as soon as you know either where the ashes are taken out, or you know where the Parakoin Mashiach is taken out to, it's the same place. So we know that the Parakoin Mashiach is taken out, for example, out of 2 camps. How do we know that? As we said, that the Parakoin Mashiach and the Par Ha'edah, they are burnt in the same place, as it says explicitly by the Par Ha'edah that it's burnt in the same place as the Parakoin Mashiach. And it says between them twice, El Michutz Lamachne, it's out of 2 camps. So once we know that the Parakoin Mashiach is burnt outside 2 camps, and in the parasha of Parakoin Mashiach it says it's burnt where the ashes are put, why does the Torah have to tell us when in the parasha of where the ashes are put, El Michutz Lamachne, outside the camp? That's not necessary. So the answer is, Ten Loi Machne Shlishis, to tell us that there's a 3rd camp that it goes out to. And once you have between these 3, Parakoin Mashiach, Par Ha'edah, and the parasha of taking the ashes out, it mentions 3, even though they're all in the same place, it's explicit, but it mentions 3 times El Michutz Lamachane to say that all 3 apply outside 3 camps. The Parakoin Mashiach is burnt outside Yerushalayim, the Par Ha'edah is burnt outside Yerushalayim, and the ashes are placed outside Yerushalayim. And that's the source that Parakoin Mashiach is burnt outside 3 machnos, and therefore we take it for granted from places where Rashi mentions elsewhere that the Parvasor Shalei Makipurim are also burnt outside Yerushalayim, in which case the question came back, why then in the parasha of Parvasor Shalei Makipurim does it say in single term Yotziel Michutz Lamachane? It must be to tell us that the people carrying the bull and the goat, as soon as they leave the first machne, the machne shchina, the azara, they're already tomei, and that's the source for the Tanakama that says me'emosai metamim begodim mishayetzu chutz lechoimas ho'azara. Continues the Gemara. Reb Shimon says in the Mishnah that the person only becomes tomei when, at the point in time when the fire has grasped hold of the par of a soyer, most of the soyer, and not when it leaves the azara. How's Reb Shimon, what's he going to do with the fact that it mentions in single term, in the parasha of Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim, it mentions that you take it out of 1 machane? How would Reb Shimon explain that? Hi michutz lamachane mai ovidle, what's he going to do with that? Answers the Gemara, look at Tanya, there's another brisa that uses this word. Rabbi Eliezer Yomer, Nemar kan, it says here regarding the Par v'Soyer Shalei Kippurim michutz lamachane, that when you take out to burn it, you take it out of 1 machane. We know it doesn't mean 1 machane, it means 3 machanes, but it uses the term michutz lamachane. V'nemar la'alon, and later on in the parasha of Pora Aduma, it says there, that the Pora Aduma is burnt outside, it's shechted, unlike the other korbanos, it's even shechted outside the Michutz Lamachane. Ma'akan, in the same way as here, in the Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim, as we've determined that it gets burnt chutz l'sholish machnos, outside 3 machnos, af lahalon, so too regarding the Pora Aduma, it gets shechted chutz l'gimel machnos. Uma lahalon, and in the same way as the Pora Aduma is shechted in the Mizrach, in the east of Yerushalayim, because it says that in the Pasuk explicitly, El noichach pnei Oyel Moed. So since he's facing the Oyel Moed, it must be that he is facing Ma'ariv, it must be he's on the Mizrach side of Yerushalayim. Afkan, so too, the Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim, where are they burnt? They are burnt Mizracho shel Yerushalayim, on the east of Yerushalayim. And now the Gemara is asking the Rabbanon, according to the opinion of the Rabbanon, who they don't have the word Michutz Lamachane of Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim available to learn from Pora Aduma that the place that the Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim get burnt is on the Mizrach, on the east side of Yerushalayim, because they use Michutz Lamachane to say that the person becomes Tomei when leaving the Azara. So according to Rabbanon, Heicha Soriflu, where does this Par v'Soyer Shlei Kippurim, what side of Yerushalayim? It's outside Yerushalayim, we know that, it's outside the 3 camps, but which position, where is it done? And The same question really we could ask that according to the Rabbanon that you don't have the Gzeira Shava from Poradumo to Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim, then where do we learn that the Poradumo has to be shechted outside Yerushalayim? That's one of the things we learnt as well, but that's not a discussion for here. The Achronim here and in Zvachim discuss that. But since we're focused on the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim, according to the Rabbanon, where do we know which side of Yerushalayim, or which side outside Yerushalayim, but which side do they burn it? Heicha Sariflu answers the Gemara Kedatanya, a Brisa. The Brisa says, Heichon Nisrofin, where does it get burnt? Litzfoino shel Yerushalayim. It's actually done on the Tzofin, on the north of Yerushalayim, because it's called a Chatos. It's a Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim ar Chatos, and all Maisa Chatos is done b'Tzofin, on the north. So you're taking it to burn it outside Yerushalayim, burn it on the north of Yerushalayim, and v'chutz l'shalish machnis, as we've seen before, that everybody agrees that the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim gets burnt outside Yerushalayim, which is outside the three camps. Rabbi Yossi says, and it seems that he's introducing something that the Tanakama didn't hold of, that when you burn it outside Yerushalayim, a Beis Hadeshen Nisrofim. The place has to be called a Beis Hadeshen, which means that before you burn the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim there, it must be that you've placed some ashes from the Mizbeach, from the big Mizbeach. In the Azara, you've placed some of the ashes there first, and it would seem that the Tanakama don't have this prerequisite, don't have this condition. Rabbi Yossi says you have to first put some ashes of the Mizbeach there, and then you can burn the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim in that place. Omar Rava. Rava said, Man Tana de Paligale to Rabbi Yossi. It seems here that the Tanakama don't make this condition. Rabbi Yossi says, Abeis Hadesh and Nisrofin, that you have to first put some ashes of the Mizbeach there. Who would the Tanakama be who say that you don't need to do that? Says the Gemara, says Rava, it seems, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who it's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in the following brisa. The Tanya we learnt in the Pasuk, that the Pasuk says, V'hoitzi es hapor el mechutz lamachane el mokim tohir el shefech hadeshin yisorif. It gets burnt, and this is talking about the Parakoin Moshiach, which is burnt, which we learn that the place that the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim is burnt is the same place as the Parakoin Moshiach, and there it says that it's burnt el shefech hadeshin. What does it mean shefech hadeshin? Sheyehei l'shom deshin. That there should first be some ashes there. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says no. What does it mean? El shefech hadeshen sheyhei mekoymei meshupach. It means that it's got to be a place which one can pour something there, which means it's slanty, slopey area. That's all the word that shefech hadeshen means. Sheyhei mekoymei meshupach, that the area is slanted. Omar lei Abaya. Abaya argued with Rava, and Abaya said no. V'dilma, it could be, everybody agrees that when it says in the Pasuk El Shefech Hadesh, and it means that you put it in the place where there's been some ashes have been placed there. That would be the basic reading of Shefech Hadeshen. What they're arguing about in the Brisa, they're just arguing if besides for needing ashes there, it also has to be a place that's worthy, that's fit to be poured on, which means that it's a bit sloping. And that's the whole machlekes. They're only arguing if it also has to be a slanted area. But everybody agrees that you would put some deshen there. And according to Abaya, the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would not be one that would be the opinion that is arguing with Rabbi Yossi. That means in the event that indeed the Tanakama are arguing with Rabbi Yossi, and they say that you don't need any ashes there, Abaya says there's no reason to believe that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov actually holds that way. Continues the Gemara. Tonu Rabbanon. We learnt in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says in the parasha of Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim, V'hasoyref oisam, anyone who's burning them, the Parvasoy Shlema Kippurim, the oisam means that it's the soyref, whatever's being done to them, the burning, is, we're talking only about what's being done, oisam, with and to the actual bull and the goat. The asoyref is, so the Brisa says, the asoyref is matame begodim. Only the one that's burning the parvasoyer is actually matame begodim. V'loy ha-meitzis es-ha'or, but not the person that ignites the fire. V'loy ha-masader es-ha'marocha, not the one that arranged the woods and the fireplace before burning the parvasoyer. that they are not Tomei. And Rashi says here that this is following the opinion of Reb Shimon in the Mishnah. Reb Shimon said, Mishayotzis ha'or barubon, which means that the person only becomes Tomei when the fire actually is burning the parvasoyer. So now it's the Brisa here is discussing that Reb Shimon, who says that it's only at the point of burning that the person's clothes become Tomei, what's considered the burning? Rashi obviously learned that according to the Tanakama in the Mishnah that says that the person becomes Tomei from leaving as soon as he leaves the walls of the Azora, as we've learned previously, that according to that opinion, what it says here may not necessarily be accurate. That's how Rashi says. That means Rashi says this Brisa is following Reb Shimon. But the Achronim discuss this at length. The Achronim in Zvachim Daf Kuvov. So what else is it say in the Brisa? Va'ezeu ha'soirif. What's called the soirif? That according to Reb Shimon, as we said, that the Pasuk says that the one who's burning the parvasoyer is the one that becomes Tomei and his clothes become Tomei, not the one that's igniting the fire or arranging the wood. It's anyone who is actually helping the actual burning process, which primarily means anybody who is churning over the parvasoyer itself. Once it's in the fire, anybody that's engaged in speeding up and helping the actual animals burn, then they are the ones that become Tomei. And some say that anyone who's actually, once they're actually burning and you add on wood or you churn the coals in the wood round, that might also be included, but it's talking about somebody who's Mesayeh b'shas sreifa. Whilst the parvasoyer is being burnt, anyone who's helping with that. As the Brisa said, excluding the one that actually just lit the fire and excluding the one who prepared the fireplace. What happens once the bull and the goat, the parvasoyer, have already turned into ashes, and the person is continuing to turn them over, that they should burn even more? Is it also matamin begodim? Talmud Leiman, no. It says oisam. It's only a soir if oisam. Oisam means par v'soir. When they lose their status of par v'soir, namely, once it's already ashes, nobody would call these ashes a bull or a goat. At that point, it's not anymore matami. Oisam matamin begodim. Only those who are engaged in burning oisam, them, the par v'soir. V'loi mishenasu efer matamin begodim. But once it's already ashes, they are not matami begodim. That was the opinion of the Tanakama. Rabbi Lazar, Reb Shimon Omer, he says no. He says it doesn't even have to be ashes. It's enough if it's not anymore considered a bull. Hapor matami, that only whilst it still has the form of a bull, that means there's still some flesh on it and you can still see that this was a bull or a goat, then it's matami. However, nitei chabosar, in the event that the meat has become decomposed, is already, the meat's gone, the meat's been burnt up, then at that point, eine mitami begodim, even though it's not yet ashes. It could be it's not yet ashes, it's just become decomposed from the burning, it's already lost its status of parvasoyer, and it's no longer mitami. My benayu, what would be the difference, the halachic point of the difference between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Elazar? Ike benayu teshavya charucha, when you have a burnt up lump of this bull, where it's not yet ashes, but it's clearly that this charucha is really the nitach. It's been decomposed. There's no meat on it anymore. You cannot determine that this is a bull or a goat anymore. This is called charucha, a burnt lump. At that point, then according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, it will no longer be matami begodim. According to Tanakama, it will still be begodim because it's not yet ashes. Continues the next Mishnah. Omru lo lekohen gadol. Now this point, because we know that the Kohen Gadol, after he sent away the goat to the Azazel, at that point he was not really allowed to do any more melachos, any more avodos. He wasn't allowed to start any more avodos. Rashi says here, he cannot start anything new, and he certainly cannot do the Kriyas HaTorah. We're going to learn about that, but in the next Perek, in the next Mishnah. But he cannot do the new Avodos, and he cannot start the Kriyas HaTorah, reading of the Torah, before the goat that was being sent to the Azazel had reached the Midbar, the desert where the cliff, where the Azazel was going to be done. So, there's a big discussion here whether what we just learned on the Mishnah and the Samach Zayin on base at the bottom, that everything that was done here, that the Kohen Gadol would remove the insides of the parvasoir and put it into a bowl, he would then send out the animal. Whether could all that be done before this Mishnah, or is it post what it says in this Mishnah, is a discussion in the Mefarshim. But either way, the Mishnah says here that in order to be able to continue the next avodos, we have to know that the goat has reached the midbar, the desert of the Azazel. Omru lo lekohen gadol. Whoever it was will soon see, but they told the Kohen Gadol, Higia soir lemidbar, that the goat has reached the midbar, the desert of the Azazel. The real truth is that Rashi says, it's going to be apparent later in Rashi, that when it says here lemidbar, it's not good enough that it came just to the desert of the Azazel, where the Azazel was. And the truth is, the desert of the Azazel was 3 mil outside Yerushalayim. The Azazel itself, the cliff itself, was 10, according to most opinions we've learnt earlier on, was 10 mil away from Yerushalayim, which was another 7 mil within that midbar. But Rashi says that when it says here, Higia soir la midbar, it means that the soir has already reached, not only it's reached the midbar, it's reached the cliff. How would they know that the soir has already reached the midbar? They couldn't go there, it was miles away. They sent somebody there. But how would that message get back to the Kohen Gadol that indeed the soir has already reached its destination? Says the Mishnah, Dirkois hayu oisim, they would designate watchmen, and they would be at places, at intervals, spread out in a way that they could see each other, they could make some form of eye contact, not real eye contact, they could see each other, umanifin besudrin, and they would wave flags. V'yoidim shegia soir lemidbar, there would be a watchman by the midbar, which is either the entranceway into the midbar, 3 mil from Yerushalayim, or it's actually at the cliff itself, which is 10 mil from Yerushalayim. We saw according to Rabbi Meir, it was 12 mil, but Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, they said it was 10 mil. And from wherever they had to be, the midbar, until all the way back to Yerushalayim, they would be at intervals where they could see each other, there would be watchmen, and as soon as they arrived, the watchman closest to this place would wave his flag, and that would be a message to the person seeing him, he would wave his flag all the way back, and they would be seen by the person closest to Yerushalayim, who would then convey the message to the Kohen Gadol. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I don't need all these watchmen. There was another way of knowing when it could be assumed that the soir had reached the destination, because Yerushalayim v'ad beis chidudoi. It's Rabbi Yehuda holds that you don't need to, that the Kohen Gadol could carry on doing his avodah when it reached just the midbar, a place called beis chidudoi, the area where the cliff was positioned, which means the midbar, the desert where the cliff was, which was shloisha milin, it was just 3 mil from Yerushalayim. The question we mentioned before was whether the Tanna Kama agrees with this. When the Tanna Kama says lemidbar, does it mean, like Rabbi Yehuda says, just arriving at the midbar at the desert, which is 3 mil from Yerushalayim? Or, as Rashi says, the Tanna Kama says that he has to arrive at the cliff itself. Rabbi Yehuda clearly says that Beis Chiduda, it's enough that he arrives in the desert where this cliff is. And how far is that desert? Shloisha milin, it's 3 mil away from Yerushalayim. So Hoilchin mil, you'll remember from a previous Gemara that the Chashuvim, the important people of Yerushalayim, would accompany the person who is taking this goat to the Azazel, would accompany him 1 mil till the first sukkah, till the hut. They would go to that hut, v'chayzer mil, and then they would come back to Yerushalayim, and that's already 2 mils. The amount of time it takes, 2 mil. That means by the time they got back to Yerushalayim, it can be assumed that the person taking the goat has also done another mil towards the Azazel. V'shayin kadei mil, they would wait an estimated time that it takes to walk a mil. There's a discussion whether they had somehow a sun clock, a sundial they could work out how long that takes, or whether they got this person to walk all the way around Harabayis, which was this 500 amos on each side, which is a mill, 2,000 amis. Either way, they would wait another time it takes to walk a mill. And then they would know that then they would know that the Azazel has reached the 3 mil, it's reached the midbar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's enough. And then you wouldn't need these watchmen. According to the Tanakama, they would have to wait the Tanakama held there were these watchmen, and as we said, Rashi says that the Tanakama says you have to wait till the soil reaches the midbar of reaches the cliff itself. And now we've got another few lines in the Mishnah, which it's a discussion exactly how to learn it. The Bach and the Vilna Gaon takes it out altogether, and the Bach says it's not a Mishnah, it's a Brisa. But either way, Rabbi Shmuel Oimer v'halei siman acher hoyolem, he argues and says, I've got even another sign to know when the goat had reached its destination, and then the Kohen Gadol could know that he can carry on the day's work, because Loshen Shel Zahiris, they would have this strip of red wool, hoyu koshur al pische shel heichal, that was tied to the entranceway of the heichal. We've learnt about this previously. Ukashigia soil midbar, when the soil reached the midbar, hoya haloshin melbin, then this piece of wool, the strip of wool, would become from red to white, and then they would know that the goat has reached its destination. Shenemar imiu chataichem kashonim, if your sins are likened to red, then kasheli galbinu, then in the merit of this avodah of the Azazel, it would actually become whitened like snow. And there's a lot of discussion here exactly why the Tanakhama didn't rely on this, why they needed the watchman. Could you rely on this? We've seen previously that at some times that this strip of wool would become whitened even before. There's a discussion here in the Mefarshim. Says the Gemara, Omar Abaya. Abaya says that from Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that Rabbi Yehuda says that it's sufficient to reach Beis Chidudoi, which is the entrance into the desert where the Azazel was, Shloisha Milin, Beis Chidudoi Bamidbar Kaima. You see clearly that since Rabbi Yehuda says it's enough to come to Beis Chidudoi, it must be that Beis Chidudoi is the beginning, which is the name of a place, it's the beginning of the Midbar, it's the beginning of the desert, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to reach the desert. And the Gemara is saying, that what Abai is trying to impress on us, and the Gemara in our version says, the Kasova Rabbi Yehuda holds, Kivan Sheigia Soyer Lamidbar Nasis Mitzvasoi, that as soon as the Soyer has reached the Midbar, it's already considered that enough of the mitzvah has been done that the Kohen Gadol could now continue, Klal Yisrael could be atoned already, and we've discussed this earlier, and the Kohen Gadol could continue doing the Avodah. And according to Rashi, we understand that it says the Kosov Rabbi Yehuda, because according to the Chachomim, Rashi understands that the goat has to get all the way to the cliff, not just to the Beis Chidudoi. The Vilna Gaon takes out these 3 words, the Kosov Rabbi Yehuda, and it seems, if according to that everybody would agree it's enough just to reach the Midbar. And when it says at the beginning of the Mishnah that according to the Chachomim, Higia Soyer Lamidbar, they agree to Rabbi Yehuda that it's enough to just reach the Midbar, and therefore everybody says, according to that version of the Gaon, everybody, if you don't hold like Rashi, everybody will agree that it's enough for it to reach the Midbar. The whole discussion was, how did they know? Was it by having watchmen, or did they just estimate it, as Rabbi says, that it was the people who these important people from Yerushalayim were going to take him, accompany him 1 mil, come back a mil, and estimate another mil of time, and that would be enough, and you wouldn't need the watchman. That's how they would learn this Gemara. And the Mirz Hashem, in the next Shiur, we're going to start the next Perek. Hadron Aloch Shnei Seirei, B'siyata Dishmaya, we've finished learning Perek Shnei Seirei. The Mirz Hashem, we're going to do Chazor on Perek Shnei Seirei, and in the next Shiur, we're going to learn Perek Boloi Kohen Gadol.